The grand ballroom of the Lagos Hilton was filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of champagne glasses. The air was sweet with the scent of fresh roses and expensive perfume. Chandeliers cast a golden glow over the crowd of elegantly dressed guests. It was the wedding of the year. At the center of the room, dancing in each other's arms, were the newlyweds, Steve and Lauren Adissa. Lauren, now officially Mrs. Adissa, looked radiant in her custom-made white gown, her face glowing with joy. Her husband, Steve, held her close as they swayed to the music, whispering sweet nothings in her ear. Their love was like a fairy tale, at least that was how it looked to everyone watching. For Lauren, this was the happiest day of her life. She had finally married the man she loved, the man she had fought for, the man who made her heart race with excitement. Steve had everything. He was successful, handsome, and powerful. But most of all, he was hers now. The hall erupted in cheers as the song ended. Steve leaned down and kissed his bride, sending the guests into another round of applause. "You look breathtaking," Steve whispered. Lauren giggled, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you, my love, are the best thing that ever happened to me." Everything was perfect. The night was theirs. Their love was strong, unbreakable, or so Lauren thought. After their dance, the couple walked around the hall, greeting their guests. Everyone who was anyone in Lagos was at their wedding: politicians, celebrities, billionaires, and powerful business executives. Lauren's father, Chief Richard Smith, had spared no expense to make his daughter's wedding the grandest event of the year. My darling daughter," Chief Smith said, raising his glass in a toast. "You have made me so proud today. You have married a great man, a strong man." He turned to Steve with an approving nod. "And you, young man, take care of my daughter. If you ever break her heart—" Steve laughed nervously. "I would never, sir." Chief Smith smiled, but his eyes were serious. "Good. Because if you do, you will have me to answer to." Lauren rolled her eyes. "Daddy, stop scaring him." The guests laughed, and the conversation continued. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, until Steve's eyes wandered across the hall. That was when he saw her. A woman stood near the buffet table, holding a tray of food. Her hands trembled slightly, and her face glistened with sweat. She was heavily pregnant. Her belly was round and full, making her already small frame seem even more fragile. Her brown skin looked tired, as if she had been working all day. Her blue dress was plain, the kind worn by the catering staff, but something about her felt familiar. Steve's heart stopped. It was Grace, his ex-wife, and she was pregnant. Steve's feet moved before his brain could stop him. He left Lauren's side, weaving through the crowd, his heart hammering in his chest. The closer he got, the more certain he became. It was really her. Grace turned and locked eyes with him. Her face hardened, and she took a step back. Steve swallowed. "Grace, what are you doing here?" Grace's lips pressed into a thin line. "What does it look like?" "I'm working." Her voice was sharp, cutting into him like a blade. Steve's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but words failed him. She was serving at his wedding? His heavily pregnant ex-wife? The humiliation burned deep. How had this happened? How had she ended up here? Before he could ask, Grace turned on her heels and marched toward the kitchen. "Grace, wait." She didn't stop. Steve followed, his mind spinning. He reached her just as she pushed open the kitchen door. He grabbed her arm gently, stopping her. "Talk to me," he pleaded. "What's going on?" Grace yanked her arm away, her eyes burning with anger. "What do you want, Steve?" Steve's gaze dropped to her swollen belly. "Is it mine?" Grace let out a bitter laugh. Would it matter if it was? Steve felt the weight of her words press down on him. He had moved on. He had married another woman. But what if this baby was his? "Grace, please," he said, his voice softer. "Tell me the truth." Grace's eyes filled with unshed tears. "You broke me, Steve. You made me feel like I was nothing. And when I walked away, you didn't even try to stop me. You just replaced me." Steve opened his mouth to argue, but he knew she was right. He had loved Grace once. Deeply. But their marriage had been difficult. He had been so focused on his business, always chasing contracts, that he had neglected her. And then there were the rumors, the accusations that he had been unfaithful. Lauren had been in the picture before Grace left, but he had never meant for things to happen this way. "Grace," he said softly, "I'm sorry." Grace shook her head. "Sorry won't change the past." She turned and disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Steve standing there, his heart in pieces. That night, as Steve lay in bed with Lauren, he couldn't stop thinking about Grace. Her words haunted him. Her pain haunted him. And most of all, the baby haunted him. Could it really be his? Beside him, Lauren stirred. "Steve," she murmured sleepily. You seem distant. Is everything okay?" Steve hesitated. He could feel her warmth against him, smell the sweet scent of her perfume. He had just married her. He should be happy. But instead, guilt gnawed at his insides. "It's just the wedding stress," he lied. Lauren smiled, pressing a soft kiss to his shoulder. "I love you, husband." Steve forced a smile. "I love you too." But as Lauren drifted back to sleep, Steve lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Had he made a mistake? Had he married the wrong woman? And more importantly, what was he going to do about Grace and the baby? The next morning, Steve sat at the dining table of his luxurious mansion, staring blankly at his untouched plate of breakfast. He could hear the soft clinking of Lauren's spoon against her plate as she ate, but his mind was far away. "Are you okay, darling?" Lauren's voice broke through his thoughts. Steve blinked and forced a smile. "Yeah, just thinking about work." Lauren reached over and squeezed his hand. "You need to stop stressing. The company is doing great, and besides, we're officially married now. You should be happy." Steve nodded, but inside, his chest felt tight. He wasn't thinking about work. He was thinking about Grace. Thinking about the baby. Thinking about the way she had looked at him last night, full of anger and pain. Could it really be his child? Was there even a doubt? He needed answers. Steve waited until Lauren left for her usual spa appointment before grabbing his car keys and heading out. He had no idea where to find Grace, but he knew one person who might help, the caterer from the wedding. After making a few calls, he was able to track down the catering company. When he got there, the owner, an elderly woman, greeted him with a warm smile. "Mr. Adissa, what a surprise. Is there a problem with the food from the wedding?" Steve shook his head.
"No, ma'am."
The food was amazing. "Actually, I wanted to ask about one of your staff members. Her name is Grace." The woman's smile faded slightly. "Oh, Grace." Steve leaned forward. "Do you know where she lives?" The woman hesitated, then sighed. "She's a good girl, but she's been struggling. She took this job because she needed money for the baby." Steve's jaw tightened. So the baby was real. "She lives in Ajagunal," the woman finally said, giving him an address. Ajagunal, one of the roughest slums in Lagos. Steve felt a pang of guilt. Grace had once lived in a beautiful house with him, with everything she could ever need. Now she was struggling in the slums. He got back into his car and drove. The sun was beginning to set when Steve arrived at the address. The neighborhood was nothing like the luxurious estates he was used to. The streets were crowded, lined with makeshift houses and small market stalls. Children ran barefoot, playing in the dirt. The smell of roasted corn and burning trash filled the air. He parked his car and walked up to the door of a tiny, run-down apartment. He knocked twice. Silence. Then, the door creaked open slightly, revealing Grace's tired face. The moment she saw him, her expression hardened. "What are you doing here?" she asked sharply. Steve hesitated. "Can I come in?" Grace scoffed.
"Why?"
"So you can see how pathetic my life is now. So you can feel sorry for me." Steve sighed.
"No."
I need to talk to you." Grace stared at him for a long moment before stepping aside. "Make it quick." The apartment was small, just a single room with a tiny bed in the corner. Clothes were stacked neatly in a corner, and there was a small gas stove beside the window. It was a far cry from the mansion they once shared. Steve looked around, his heart sinking. "You shouldn't be living like this," he said. Grace crossed her arms. And whose fault is that? Steve turned to face her. Grace, is the baby mine? Grace's eyes flashed with anger. Yes, Steve. The baby is yours. Do you think I would be here, working as a waitress at your wedding, struggling to survive if it wasn't? Steve took a deep breath. The truth was out. He was going to be a father. Steve sat down on the only chair in the room, running a hand through his hair. Why didn't you tell me? Grace let out a bitter laugh.
Tell you?
Steve, you were already with her. The moment I left, you replaced me. You didn't even look for me. Steve opened his mouth to argue, but he stopped. She was right. Grace shook her head. I waited, you know? I waited for weeks, hoping you'd come after me, hoping you'd fight for me. But you didn't. You never cared. Steve swallowed hard. That's not true, isn't it? Grace's voice cracked. I was your wife, Steve. And you threw me away like I meant nothing. A heavy silence filled the room. Steve felt the lump in his throat. He had made mistakes. He had been so focused on his career, on climbing higher, that he had neglected the woman he once loved. Grace, he said softly, I don't want to abandon my child. Let me be in his life. Grace's eyes darkened. And why should I believe you? How do I know you won't disappear again when things get hard? Steve clenched his fists. I won't. I promise. But Grace had heard enough promises before. She turned away from him. I don't trust you, Steve. Steve felt his chest tighten. He wanted to fix things, but how could he if she wouldn't let him? Grace, he said, standing up, I'm not asking for you to forgive me. I just want to do the right thing. Grace sighed. If you really mean that, show it. Steve nodded. I will. As he walked out of the apartment, one thought consumed him. He had to fix this, even if it meant losing everything else. Steve returned home late that night. The drive from Ajagunal to his mansion in Banana Island felt like traveling between two different worlds. From the slums, where Grace struggled to survive, to a life of luxury with Lauren, he was torn between them. As he stepped into the house, the scent of lavender candles filled the air. Lauren had transformed their bedroom into a romantic setting, rose petals on the bed, soft music playing in the background. She was sitting on the bed, wearing a silk nightgown, waiting for him with a warm smile. You're late, she murmured. Steve forced a smile and loosened his tie. Work ran late. Lauren's eyes searched his face. Are you okay? You've been acting distant since the wedding. Steve's heart pounded. She was beginning to notice. I'm just tired, he said, moving to kiss her forehead. Lauren wrapped her arms around his waist. I don't want you to stress, my love. We're married now. Whatever is on your mind, you can share with me. But how could he tell her? How could he tell his wife that he had spent the night tracking down his pregnant ex-wife? So he lied. It's nothing, babe. Just business stress. Lauren pulled back slightly, watching him. She looked unsure but nodded. Okay. Just promise me, if something is wrong, you'll tell me. Steve swallowed hard. I promise. A promise he had no intention of keeping. Over the next few weeks, Steve made sure to check on Grace regularly. He brought her groceries, paid for her medical bills, and even slipped money into her purse when she wasn't looking. But Grace wasn't making things easy. I don't want your money, Steve, she said one evening as he handed her an envelope full of cash. It's not for you, Grace. It's for the baby, he insisted. She sighed, looking at him with weary eyes. Why are you doing this? Out of guilt. Steve hesitated before answering. Because it's my responsibility. Grace scoffed. That's funny. You didn't think about responsibilities when you moved on with your rich new wife. Steve clenched his jaw. Grace, I can't change the past. But I can do better now. She studied him for a long moment, then finally took the envelope. If you really mean that, then you need to do better than what you're doing. Meanwhile, Lauren couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Steve was distant, always distracted. He spent long hours outside the house and seemed lost in thought even when he was home. Then, one evening, while Steve was in the shower, Lauren saw his phone buzzing on the bedside table. Message from caterer Aisha. Thank you for the food money. God bless you, sir. Lauren frowned. Why was her husband sending money to a caterer? Her fingers hovered over the phone. Should she check his messages?
No.
Steve wouldn't cheat on her. Would he? The doubt gnawed at her. She needed to know the truth. A few days later, Lauren made a decision. If Steve wouldn't tell her what was going on, she would find out herself. She called a private investigator, Mr. Okafor, a retired police officer who was known for being discreet. "I need you to follow my husband," Lauren said, handing him a picture of Steve. "Find out where he goes and who he meets." Mr. Okafor gave her a small nod. "I'll get to work immediately." Lauren sat back, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the truth. 2 days later, Lauren received a call from Mr. Okafor. "I have information," he said. "Can you meet me now?" Lauren's hands trembled as she drove to the location he had given her, a small coffee shop in Victoria Island. When she arrived, Mr. Okafor slid a manila envelope across the table. "Your husband has been visiting a woman. Regularly." Lauren's chest tightened.
Who?
Mr. Okafor hesitated. "His ex-wife." Lauren's blood ran cold. She ripped open the envelope, her hands shaking. Inside were pictures. Steve entering a small apartment in a poor neighborhood. Steve carrying groceries. Steve standing beside a heavily pregnant Grace. Her heart shattered. Steve had lied. The love of her life, the man she had fought for, had been sneaking around with his ex-wife. She felt sick. This was betrayal. That evening, Lauren waited for Steve to come home. When he finally walked in, he was surprised to find her sitting in the dark. "Lauren," he asked cautiously. She flipped on the lamp, revealing the pictures spread out on the table. "Care to explain this?" she said, her voice dangerously calm. Steve froze. His stomach dropped as he saw the images, the proof of his secret visits to Grace. Lauren stood up, crossing her arms. "How long have you been lying to me?" Steve swallowed. "Lauren, I can explain."
Don't, she snapped.
"Just tell me the truth. Are you still in love with her?" Steve looked down, unable to meet her eyes. He had a choice to make. Lauren's eyes burned with unshed tears. "It's me or her, Steve. Choose." Steve's breath caught in his throat. He loved Lauren, but he couldn't turn his back on his child. "I can't abandon my baby," he said softly. Lauren stared at him, her face twisting with rage and heartbreak. "Then get out," she whispered. Steve's chest tightened. "Lauren, please." "I said get out," she screamed. She grabbed his wedding ring from her finger and threw it at him. Steve stood there for a long moment, watching the woman he had promised forever to fall apart in front of him. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. His marriage was over. And now, he had nowhere to go but back to Grace. The drive from his once happy home to Grace's small apartment felt like a slow march toward uncertainty. Steve had made his choice, but why did it feel like he had lost everything? His heart was heavy, his mind filled with thoughts of Lauren's face, her pain, her rage, the way she had screamed at him to leave. He had broken her trust. But what choice did he have? He couldn't turn his back on his child. When he arrived at Grace's place, he hesitated before knocking. He wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing. The door swung open, and Grace stood there in her oversized nightgown, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What are you doing here?" she asked, frowning. Steve exhaled. "Lauren kicked me out." Grace blinked, then crossed her arms. "And you think that means you can just show up here?" "I have nowhere else to go," Steve admitted. Grace studied him for a moment before stepping aside. "Come in." The apartment was dimly lit, cluttered with baby clothes and supplies. Steve could hear the faint hum of a ceiling fan, but the air still felt thick. Grace sat down on the bed, staring at him. "So, what now?" Steve rubbed his face. "I don't know." Grace sighed. "Steve, I never asked you to leave your wife." "I didn't leave her," Steve said bitterly. "She threw me out." Grace shook her head. "That's between you and Lauren. You don't get to make me your backup plan." Steve clenched his fists. "I'm not here because I have nowhere else to go. I'm here because I want to do right by you and our child." Grace let out a dry laugh. "You should have thought about that before you married someone else 6 months after I left." The word stung. Steve looked down. I made mistakes, Grace. She sighed and leaned back. I don't trust you, Steve. And I don't know if I ever will. Silence filled the room. Steve wasn't expecting things to be easy, but he didn't think it would hurt this much either. Back at the mansion, Lauren sat on the bed, staring at her wedding pictures. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through old memories, the moments when she had believed she and Steve had a future together. Now, everything was ruined. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Steve had humiliated her. He had lied to her, and she would make sure he paid for it. Lauren picked up her phone and dialed a number. Daddy, she whispered, her voice shaking with controlled fury. It's over. Steve chose her. Chief Richard Smith was silent for a moment. Then he spoke in his deep, commanding voice. I warned him. No one humiliates my daughter and gets away with it. Lauren wiped her tears, her face hardening. I want him ruined, Daddy. A long pause. Then, her father's voice came cold and sharp. Consider it done. The first hit came the next morning. Steve woke up to a phone call from his assistant. Sir, we lost the Okoro Towers contract. The government pulled out. Steve sat up, rubbing his temple.
What? Why?
I don't know, sir. But there are rumors, something about corruption and bribery allegations. Steve's stomach twisted. By noon, another contract was canceled. By evening, 3 more deals had collapsed. And then the worst news came. The bank called. His company accounts had been frozen. Steve felt the world closing in around him. This was Lauren's revenge. She was destroying everything he had built. That night, Steve sat on Grace's small couch, his head in his hands. Everything was falling apart. His business, his reputation, his life. Grace sat across from him, arms folded. What's happening? Steve sighed. Lauren is coming after me. Grace swallowed. And you think she's going to stop at your business? Steve looked up at her. Grace's face was pale. Her hand instinctively rested on her belly. Steve's heart clenched. Lauren wouldn't, would she? Would she come after Grace and the baby? The next day, a news article surfaced. Steve Addis's alleged secret child, the mistress and the betrayal. Grace's name was everywhere. Her picture, heavily pregnant, was plastered all over social media. People called her a gold digger, a homewrecker. Grace's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her landlord knocked on her door, telling her she had 1 week to move out. Steve clenched his fists in rage. Lauren had gone too far. She wasn't just coming for him. She was destroying Grace too. That night, Steve made a decision. We're leaving, he told Grace. Grace frowned. Leaving? Where? Steve's jaw tightened. Somewhere safe. I won't let Lauren ruin your life because of me. Grace hesitated. And what about your business? Steve shook his head. I've already lost everything. The only thing I care about now is you and the baby. Grace searched his face for any sign of deceit. For the first time in a long time, she saw something real in his eyes. Regret. Determination.
Love.
Finally, she nodded. Okay. Steve sold his remaining shares, took whatever money he could, and moved Grace to a quiet estate in Enkay. A new mansion. A new start. I don't want our child to spend a single night in the slums, he told Grace.
She didn't argue.
She was too exhausted, too broken from the storm that had nearly consumed her. Steve had lost everything. Lauren had won. But as Grace lay in bed that night, feeling their baby kick, she realized something. Maybe, just maybe, Steve had won something too. Not wealth, not power, but a second chance. Weeks passed. The storm had settled, but its destruction was still visible. Steve had lost his company, his reputation, and his marriage. But he had gained something he never expected, a second chance at fatherhood. Grace went into labor in the early hours of the morning. Steve drove like a madman through the empty streets of Lagos, his hands gripping the steering wheel as Grace groaned in pain beside him. Breathe, Grace, he kept saying, though he himself was struggling to breathe. At the hospital, the nurses rushed her into the delivery room. Steve paced outside, heart hammering in his chest. Would she be okay? Would the baby be okay? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the doctor emerged with a smile. Congratulations, Mr. Adissa. You have a son. Steve exhaled sharply, his legs feeling weak. A son. When he entered the hospital room, he saw Grace cradling a tiny bundle in her arms. She looked exhausted, her face pale, but she was smiling. Meet Victor, she whispered. Steve stared at the baby. The tiny fingers, the little nose, the peaceful expression. Something inside him shifted. This child was his flesh, his blood. Tears welled in his eyes. He sat beside Grace, gently touching Victor's tiny hand. He's perfect. Grace looked up at him. You really mean that? Steve nodded. Yes. For the first time in a long time, he knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted to be a father. Over the next few weeks, Steve settled into his new role. He changed diapers, rocked Victor to sleep, and even learned how to mix formula. But something wasn't right. Grace still kept her distance. She let him help with the baby, but she never let him in. One night, as he stood by the crib watching Victor sleep, he heard her voice behind him. You don't have to stay, you know. Steve turned around. What? Grace folded her arms. You've done your part. You bought us a house, you take care of the baby. But you don't have to pretend. Steve's jaw tightened. Is that what you think? That I'm pretending? Grace looked away. I don't know if I can trust you, Steve. Steve ran a hand through his hair. I know I hurt you, Grace. I know I made mistakes. But I'm here. Doesn't that count for something? Grace's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw the truth. She was afraid. Afraid that if she let him in, he would leave again. Afraid that if she believed in him, he would break her heart. Steve reached for her hand. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But let me prove to you that I've changed. Grace hesitated, then slowly nodded. Just as things were starting to feel normal, an unexpected visitor arrived at their doorstep. Lauren. Steve opened the door to find his ex-wife standing there, looking as poised and elegant as ever. But her eyes were cold. I need to talk to you, she said. Steve stepped outside, closing the door behind him. What do you want, Lauren? She smirked. You look terrible, Steve. I see poverty doesn't suit you. Steve clenched his fists. Say what you came to say and leave. Lauren's expression hardened. I came to tell you that my father isn't done with you. You think you can just walk away and live happily ever after with her? No. I will ruin you until there's nothing left. Steve felt his stomach drop. Lauren, you've already taken everything from me. Lauren leaned in. Not yet. But I will. She turned on her heels and walked away, leaving Steve standing there, his hands trembling. She wasn't done. And that terrified him. That night, Steve couldn't sleep. Lauren's words haunted him. Grace noticed his tension. What's wrong? Steve hesitated, then sighed. Lauren was here today. Grace stiffened. What did she want? Steve swallowed. She's not done. She wants to destroy me completely. Grace's face darkened. And what does that mean for us? Steve rubbed his face. I don't know. But I won't let her hurt you or Victor. Grace looked at him for a long moment before shaking her head. I can't do this, Steve. Steve's heart pounded. What? Grace took a deep breath. I can't live in fear, wondering when your past will come back to haunt us. I can't keep waiting for the moment you decide you miss your old life. Steve's chest tightened. That's not going to happen. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I want to believe you, Steve. But I don't know if I can. Steve stepped forward. Grace, please. She shook her head. I think you should go. Steve froze. Go. Grace's voice broke. For now. Until I can figure out if I can trust you again. Steve felt like the air had been knocked out of him. After everything, after all he had tried to fix, she still didn't trust him. The next morning, Steve packed his bags. He kissed Victor's forehead, promising to visit every day. Then he turned to Grace. I love you, Grace. She looked at him, but she didn't say it back. She only whispered, Goodbye, Steve. And just like that, he was alone again. Lauren had won. Grace still didn't trust him. And Steve had lost everything. But as he walked away from the house, he made a silent vow. He would earn Grace's trust back. He would be the father Victor deserved. And maybe, just maybe, one day, he would find his way back to love.